Hello everyone, and welcome to GLB Productions. In this video, we're going to look at effects pedal or modeling DIs. Now, since it's been a little while since we've done a DI box video, let's review what we've learned so far. In the first video, we learned that DI boxes have basically two main functions. The first is impedance conversion or impedance matching. DI boxes convert something that has a relatively high output impedance, like a piezo pickup on an acoustic guitar, to a signal that has low impedance such that it can be run long distances without suffering from degradation due to noise. The second function of DI boxes is signal balancing. They convert unbalanced signals from guitars, keyboards, and so on to balanced signals which take full advantage of the noise rejection properties of the balanced inputs on mixing consoles, recorders, and the like. Unbalanced signals typically can be run about 15 feet or 5 meters before they start to get noisy. Balanced signals can be run 600 meters or more with no issues whatsoever. In the second video, we learned about active and passive DI boxes. Active DI boxes use phantom or battery-powered electronics to balance the signal. Passive DI boxes use transformers and as a result need no external power and provide the additional advantage of galvanic isolation, meaning that there is no physical electrical contact between the input and the output coils of the transformer. It is an electromagnetic bridge. In our third video, we learned about the differences between standalone DI boxes versus DI boxes built into amplifiers, what the differences are, how they were connected, and what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of each type. So that brings us to this, our fourth video, effects pedal or Stompbox DIs. Now, when we talk about Stompbox DIs, what we are talking about is effects pedals or modeling pedals that have a balanced low impedance output. Now, we have two such examples of the breed in front of us. On the top, you can see here we have a Boss 83 acoustic instrument processor, which is designed to offer some anti-feedback, some EQ, chorus, and reverb. And below, you have the legendary Sansamp Bass Diver DI, which is designed to offer tube simulation without the use of a tube bass amplifier. Now, as you can see, both of these units have balanced outputs, and as a result, they fulfill the functions of a DI box. The question when dealing with these units is it possible to use them just as a DI box? In other words, say I want a completely transparent signal without any effects, without any EQ, without my signal being changed in any way. Is it possible? And this is worth knowing because there may be times where you've run out of normal DI boxes and you're having to resort to some of these in your inventory, or you just want a transparent signal. Perhaps you're in the recording studio and you want to record a dry track which will be used later for reamping, or you've just decided that you don't like the way that the modeling or effect on that particular pedal sounds, but the DI itself sounds good. So to answer that question, we need to determine three things. First of all, what does the unit have in addition to the DI section? Here we're referring to the modeling, effect, and EQ that it has. Secondly, can these additional features be turned off or bypassed in order to use it as a transparent, regular DI box? And if so, how do we go about doing that? And finally, how do I set it up and connect it to my mixer? We'll begin with the Sansamp Bass Diver DI. Now, the original Sansamp Bass DI was released in 1992, and it was invented by Andrew Barter in New York City, USA. It was the first DI box to incorporate tube emulation circuitry, allowing studio musicians to record without a physical amp, hence the name Sansamp. Sans meaning without in French, so without an amp. This has since gone on to become something of an industry standard for bass guitar, and it essentially allows you to sound like you're playing through an Ampeg SVT. Okay, so if I hold him up to the camera, it has three sections, as you can see. It has a DI section, obviously. It has an EQ section, which consists of bass and treble. And it has a tube emulation section, which consists of level, drive, and presence. Many people think that the presence control is part of the EQ circuit. As you will see shortly, it is actually part of the drive circuit. It has a foot switch, which allows you to enable or disable the emulation circuitry, and it has a phantom and ground connect switch, which is basically a ground lift switch. In terms of connectors, you'll notice that it is very, very similar to a standard DI box. You have an input connector, as well as a parallel output, which is basically a through connector, and you have both balanced and unbalanced emulated outputs. This one being designed for you to connect to your stage amplifier, and this one to connect to a recorder or the PA system. Okay. Next, let's look at how you would set this unit up. As with all DI boxes, you would connect a female XLR cable to the output, as so forth. And this cable would then be run into an input on your mixer. For this, we'll be using channel 3. If you're wondering what's plugged into channel 1, it's the microphone which is picking up my voice. Hello. Which today is an Audio-Technica AE5100. Now we have to plug in our instrument, which today is my Fender American Standard Jazz Bass. I'm really sorry, but there's no room to film me actually playing, so you'll have to take my word for it that I don't have Marcus Miller in here. As if. So, plugging a standard guitar cable into my bass, and then I will plug the other end of the cable into the input of the Sansamp Bass Driver DI. And that completes the connection between the Sansamp and the instrument. Okay. Now, the next step would be to set gain on the mixer. So we're plugged into channel 3. I'm going to press my PFL and raise my gain. There we go. Release PFL and bring up the fader. Now, obviously, because we're running through a mixer, you can hear both my voice as well as the bass guitar. Now, that hiss is from the Sansamp. Right, so we're now hooked up. Okay, now that we're hooked up and we've discussed the various sections of the Sansamp Bass Driver DI, let's answer the second question on our list. Can the additional features of this DI be disabled so that we can use it as a standard transparent DI? Obviously, when the light is on and the foot switch is engaged, you have the tube emulation circuitry, so you can hear it there. Without the tube emulation circuitry. So we know that with the light off, that part of the circuit is disengaged. But let's look a little bit more in detail. Now, in all of these things, the owner's manual or operations manual of the unit is your friend. And if you look at the operations manual for the Sansamp Bass Diver DI, and you can see it says there, when the LED is off, Sansamp Bass Diver DI functions as an active transparent direct box and does not sonically alter the instrument signal. However, on the opposite page, you'll see that it makes mention of the blend control, and it says while the Sansamp tube amplifier emulation circuitry is bypassed when blend is at minimum, the bass treble and level controls remain active. So let's say you're on and you don't want the tube emulation part, but you still want to be able to use the EQ. What you would do is you would simply turn the blend control fully counterclockwise. Now, if you have a listen here, so what we've got here is the level control is still active, as you can hear there, and our bass and treble controls are still active as well. So, as you can see, you have options. You can have all of the circuitry completely off, using it as a standard active DI box, or you can have the blend control set to minimum and use just the EQ and level controls. This can be useful if sometimes you want to use just part of the unit rather than all of it. Now, when it comes to the Boss 83, things get a little bit more complicated. The Sansamp is relatively straightforward because not only does it look like a DI box, it has all the standard DI box connections that we're used to. With the 83, not only does it have 2 foot pedals and a number of knobs, it has on the back, it has a level control, and surprise, surprise, no XLR outputs. So the first question is always to ask, can I even use this as a DI box? Does it have balanced outputs? Once again, the owner's manual is your friend, and as you can see here, it says quite clearly, the 83 supports balanced output. For balanced output, use commercially available stereo standard cord or stereo standard to Canon conversion cord. Now, this is a slightly cryptic statement, which is basically saying that you need to use a TRS to XLR adapter. Now, you can use a commercially available adapter such as this, which you would connect directly to the output of the unit and connect a standard microphone cable here, or you can make or have made up a adapter cable, which is my preference. This one has definitely seen better days. It's about 10 years old, and as you can see, it's simply a TRS jack wired through a short length of mic cable to a male XLR connector. I prefer these simply because they don't add the bulk of an adapter. An adapter plugged into an XLR connector can get a little bit heavy, and it can sometimes wear out the output sockets prematurely. Okay, so that's the first thing. No XLR outputs, no problem. Just get the appropriate adapters and then we're ready to go. Or are we? If we take another look at the back of the unit, you can see that it has 2 outputs and this selector switch. Now, what does this mean? Guitar amp line mono, line left or right. What is it talking about? Well, once again, you have to consult your owner's manual. And just above the section that we were looking at just now, you can see here that legend is explained. With the selector switch in the stereo position, it basically gives you a stereo output either to mixer or to a multi-track recorder. With the selector switch in the, for want of a better word, dual mono position, you can see that this functions as a transparent line out, and the right connector can be connected to an electric guitar amplifier. So essentially it gives you a little bit of tone shaping that allows you to still get an acoustic type sound from an electric guitar amplifier. That is explained most fully here. You can see here the 83 has an onboard acoustic guitar amp simulator, approaches the original sound of an acoustic guitar even with a guitar amp. Now again, it's very non-specific, but that's what I'm told that output does. Okay, so how are we going to hook this guy up? As we said before, you can either hook it up in stereo or you can hook it up in dual mono. Since we're here today, just for kicks and giggles, let's hook it up in stereo and go the full Monty, as it were. So what we want is to ensure that our selector switch is in the stereo position. If you were running this dual mono, you'd use this connector to your mixer and this connector to your on-stage amplifier. So we're going to connect from these two using our adapter cables to XLR inputs on the mixer itself. So first, let's do the left connection. And now let's do the right connection. Okay. Now, on the mixer itself, make sure that my channel EQ is set flat here. I'm using channels 3 and 4 because we have a stereo connection. I'm going to pan channel 3 hard left and channel 4 hard right. And now we have to set up our gain. So let's connect our instrument to the input on the back. The instrument that we're using today is my Takamine TSF-48C. Sorry, once again, no room to film. Now, as we saw, the 83 has a level control on the back. Now, this is a function or feature of a number of these Stompbox DIs. The DI actually has a gain control. So you need to set that before you set gain on the mixer. Otherwise, you run the risk of having either excessively hot gain, which distorts the circuitry in the DI itself, or a gain that is too low and thus a poor signal to noise ratio. So first of all, we're going to turn on the power to the unit. The peak unit blinks rapidly. That's like the circuitry booting up. And the owner's manual says here that you should adjust the input level knob so that the peak indicator lights up momentarily when you play the guitar forcefully. So let's do a little bit of forceful guitar playing here. So you can see there, when I really strum hard, the peak lights up there. Obviously, if the light didn't come on at all, you'd raise the gain. If it was on all the time, you'd back it off a little bit. I found that on this particular unit, a gain of 12 o'clock works pretty well for most active guitars. Okay, now that our gain is set on the Boss, let's set our gain on the mixer. So over here, we press PFL on channel 3. Now you can see on my meters over here that I'm almost at zero even with the gain all the way down. This is one of the issues that I discussed in my active versus passive DI box video. Here we've got an active guitar plugged into an active DI box, and as a result we got a really hot signal. So I'm just going to leave the gain all the way down, and then we want to unmute and bring up both channels, disengaging our PFL there. Okay, very good. Alright, so brief rundown of the controls and features that you can see on the 83. First of all, you have an anti-feedback section. So you have a manual anti-feedback control, which is basically a very narrow notch filter. And you have an auto anti-feedback pedal. This is like a panic switch when everything is feeding back. You have EQ. It says it says bottom and top. Basically it's bass and treble. You have chorus and you have a reverb. So let's answer the second question. How do we bypass these features? Certain things I think are pretty obvious. In the case of the chorus, there's a light on the pedal. So if the light is on, we have chorus. Kind of cool there. With the light off, we have no chorus. Okay. So that's the chorus. There's no need to turn the knob down. You just make sure the light is not on. Now, the reverb is a little bit more complex because there is no pedal, and as a result, we have to consult the manual. Now, the manual here says turning the control knob clockwise deepens the reverb, turning it counterclockwise lessens the effects, and turning it all the way turns it off. So with the reverb, to turn it off, we simply turn it fully counterclockwise. So reverb and no reverb. Now, what about the anti-feedback section? With this, it's pretty obvious. If the light is off, it's not operational. What about the manual anti-feedback? Once again, looking at the manual here, turning the knob all the way counterclockwise switches the effect off. You can see there, it's a very narrow notch filter. So we want to turn this all the way clockwise and just check our tone. Not too bad. Now, what about the EQ? Does the EQ itself have an off position? Looking at the manual, you can see there's a diagram there. They talk a little bit about what the EQ does, and as you can see at the bottom there, setting it to 0 produces flat characteristics. I love the way that the Japanese write their manuals. And over on the top, doesn't say, but you can assume that at the 12 o'clock position, the EQ is effectively off. So we can just check there. So here we have more bass. Here we have less bass. And in the middle it's flat. So that's how we would do that. So in this configuration, the 83 is effectively functioning as a transparent active DI box. Once again, just like the Sansamp, you can enable various sections. You can use the EQ alone, you can use the chorus alone, the reverb alone, or you can disable everything and just use it as a transparent DI box. Now finally, just to satisfy my own curiosity, what I've done is I flipped the switch on the back to the dual mono position. So what we've got now is a transparent signal supposedly coming into channel 3, and the one that's intended for connection to an electric guitar amp coming into channel 4. Let's see if they actually sound any different. First of all, the transparent one from the left output. And now the one that's intended to be connected to the guitar amp. As you can hear, there's a little bit, maybe it's a little bit brighter, less bottom end. Personally, I haven't actually tried connecting this to an electric guitar amp. I just go direct, but that was to satisfy my curiosity. So there you go, an example of two Stompbox or modeling DIs, the Sansamp Bass Diver DI and the Boss 83. As you can see from the video, on most of these units it is possible to bypass or turn off nearly all of the additional features that they provide, whether it be reverb, EQ, chorus, or some form of tube or amplifier emulation. The key is to understand what you're trying to achieve and which parts of the circuit you'd like to employ to shape the tone of your instrument. The owner's manual is your friend. In both of these cases, we were able to determine very, very clearly by reading through the owner's manual how we switched off or bypassed the various sections of the units. Well, that's the end of this video. I hope that it's been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, do feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I always love hearing from you, my dear subscribers. This has been Bruno Luce from GLB Productions, and I'll see you in the next video.